Let's get some analysis now from Dan Marks, who's a research fellow in energy security at the Royal United Services Institute. Thanks for talking to us here, Dan.
Thanks for inviting me.
So the dip that we've seen in the last day or so, is this the result of some real relief to the sector, or is it people reacting to Netanyahu's comments with perhaps some hope?
Yeah, I think that prices at the moment are being driven in large part by expectations about the conflict itself, how long it will last, how intensive the fighting will be, and the extent to which energy infrastructure will be targeted. So obviously after the attack on the South Pars gas field in Iran, there was concern that fighting would really escalate, that energy would become a major target, and you could see real damage, including to the infrastructure that's still allowing oil and gas to get out of the region. Since then, Donald Trump has come out and said pretty strongly that he doesn't really want energy infrastructure targeted. Israel saying now that they're seeming to agree with that, at least for now. So I think that's in large part what's driving the price. So it is quite speculative and quite volatile around that kind of 195 to 110 kind of price.
When you say that it's speculative and volatile, am I correct in reading into that a little bit? That's perhaps some of the amount of strategic reserves that can be fallen back on, some of the contingency that has been put in place over the years. Is all of that correctly priced in, or are we seeing a lot of fear based around how dramatic these events are?
No, I think they've been fairly well priced in many ways. The oil market is much more resilient than it was in the 1970s and early 80s. There are the strategic reserves. There's a lot more inventory. The oil market itself is much more sophisticated. And I think that's actually preventing oil prices getting quite a lot higher. The fear, models in the past have shown much higher price increases potentially for the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. I mean, it is a massive thing to happen. So I think that's keeping the price around where it is now. Really, it's a question, I think, for the markets of how long will the strait remain closed and how much damage is done that creates more long-term issues.
And is it perhaps the threat now is there is some contingency to get around the Strait of Hormuz blockade, but if we keep seeing key oil and gas sites struck in the region, that's what's really going to start worrying people?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of scope for escalation, actually. So at the moment, the strait is closed. There have been some attacks on facilities, the most damaging really on Qatar. But the pipeline, for example, that takes crude through Saudi Arabia and allows it to be put onto ships in the Red Sea, that's not been attacked and is operating fine. The UAE facilities that allow them to export still have been attacked, but they're still operating. So there's a lot of ways that this could escalate and get worse. It has actually been, to an extent, contained so far. And I think that's where the fear will be.
And in terms of just what we heard from the UN Maritime Summit over the last few days, thousands of ships stranded on one side of the strait. Other ships, as we know, have been struck and have had incidents related to the conflict itself. When was the last time we saw something like this?
It's a good question. I'm not sure we've ever seen anything quite like this on this scale. Obviously, there was the period when the Suez Canal was closed. Also a big disruption to shipping for a few days at least. But really, that nothing like this has happened at least since the revolution itself in 1979 in Iran and the oil crises that followed that. So a long time.
Now, you mentioned at the start there how everyone is trying to figure out how long this will last. We've heard Netanyahu claim that it's not going to be as long as feared. We're also now hearing that these 6 countries will intervene to protect the Strait of Hormuz, but only in the event of a ceasefire. So everyone is trying to calibrate this question, and at the moment it seems incredibly unclear. And if you were to put a sort of prediction, I think it's anyone's guess could be easily wrong.
Yeah, I mean, the fact is that we just don't know, because a lot of it rests on how does Iran view its interests when it comes to the when it comes to de-escalation. So if the United States and Israel say, okay, we've achieved our war objectives, we want to leave, does Iran say, okay, well, we've also had enough, we'll allow the strait to be reopened, or does it actually say, no, you can't attack and kill our leaders and destroy a lot of our infrastructure and defense infrastructure and pay no cost, when they can impose a cost? So what's the incentive for Iran to de-escalate? And that's really the question. It's hard to know who are the leaders even making that decision at the moment. How fragmented are they? How hardline are they? And how do they see the interests of their regime? Because they may want to make a point, incur a large cost, and deter future attacks by just dragging it on for longer.
Yeah, Dan Marks from the Royal United Services Institute. Thank you very much for speaking to France 24.